Do you need to test out your max and how often? And for those that aren't familiar, your max means your max lift. And for most people that ask this question, it's in reference to your one rep max. So how much weight you can lift for only one rep. This is very popular in the powerlifting community. This is very popular in like any kind of bodybuilding as well. Just being as strong as you can, seeing what you can do as your all out effort for one rep. This past week, I've been doing my one rep maxes for the four main lifts. So I've done squats, bench, and overhead press so far. Tomorrow I'll be doing deadlift. Do you need to test out your max? Is a good question. You don't need to. Not everyone needs to test out their max. And for most people, I definitely wouldn't recommend it. I would only recommend it for more experienced people in terms of actually testing out their 100% max, one rep max. But I do think everyone can benefit from going through some sort of strength test. There's a lot of technology that will tell you how much body fat percentage you have, tell you how much muscle mass you have, but they have such a big, what's the word? Something of error,
Margin of error.
that they're not reliable. So our most reliable gauge of how much muscle you have on your body is how much weight you can lift, because there's a direct relationship between how much muscle you have and how much weight you can lift. So if we're about to go through a 12, 16, 20 week fat loss phase, we want to try and maintain as much muscle as we can. And the best way for us to gauge that is to do a strength test at the beginning, do a strength test at the end. And if the weights are similar or higher, we were able to maintain or gain muscle during that time period. If the weights are significantly lower, that means a lot of the weight that we lost was actually muscle and not fat, which is the opposite of what we wanted. So this is just a good gauge for us to make sure that we stayed on track the way that we wanted to. And every client that I ever have on board, we go through a strength test to start things off, because this is a good reference to seeing what your max capacity is, to seeing what 100% effort is like. Because for a lot of people that are getting into fitness for the first time, that are getting into training for the first time or dieting for the first time, they don't always know what their max limit is. They don't always know what it feels like to really push yourself to the edge. And that's a very valuable feeling, because that'll dictate how much weight you can do. A lot of times you're a lot stronger than you think you are. There was this study done by Brad Schoenfeld. I don't know if I ever say his name right, but that's always how I read it, where they tested the 10 rep max for, I think, like 20 men age 18 to 24. So they asked them what their 10 rep max was, and every kid told them what their 10 rep max was, and then they forced them to do as many reps as possible at that weight. So if they said their 10 rep max was 150 pounds, they said, okay, we're putting 150 pounds on the bar, you're going to do one set as many reps as you can. So in their mind going into this, they think they can only do 10 reps. But for a really high majority, I think it was like 80% of the participants in this study, they did at least 60% more. So they hit 16 reps or more when they were actually tested. So obviously they were 60% stronger than they thought they were. And they wouldn't actually know this unless they pushed themselves to that point, unless they were forced to actually test out their strength. So in a lot of cases, and this is very common for most people, they are limiting themselves, limiting their results, because they think they can't do as much as they actually can. Putting yourself in a position where you are forced to push yourself or you're forced to test your strength is a really helpful gauge to improve the rest of your lifting. Because even though you won't be doing your max the entire time, you can be doing more than you thought you were doing. So this person thought this was their 10 rep max, when really this is their 15, 16 rep max, right? And they could have been doing a lot more for 3 sets of 10 than they were otherwise. So having that experience of testing out your strength is valuable in helping you improve your workouts and do more on your workouts without even demanding so much more. And it also helps you recognize what it actually feels like to push yourself to the limit, to push yourself to 100% effort. Because for a lot of people, once we get to 80% effort, our mind is like, oh, we gotta stop, but your body can still continue going. So until you push yourself to 100% effort, you don't know what it feels like. You'll think your 80% effort is 100%, and you'll stop sooner than you likely should be for most weights slash reps. How often should you test your maxes? And I wouldn't test them frequently. I definitely wouldn't test them weekly. I wouldn't even test them monthly. I would say the most frequent you should test your maxes is every 3 months. That is the most frequent, I would say. You go through one main phase of training. So I just went through a 12-week strength building phase. And after I finished the third block of this one phase, that's when I tested my strength again. Because the point of the strength building phase was to see how much strength I've developed in this time period. I did the strength test at the beginning of the training block, and now I did it at the end to see how much I've actually improved. It's a good gauge to see how much I've improved. Twice a year is probably like a good aim to look at. And you can test out your max in several different ways. You don't have to test out your max with your 1 rep max. You could test out your 5 rep max, your 10 rep max. You can even test out putting a ratio of your body weight onto the bar and doing as many reps as you can. So what I mean by that is if I'm 200 pounds, I would do something like my body weight on a bar. So I'll do 200 pounds on the squat bar and see how many reps I can rep out at 200 pounds. And that would be a good gauge of my body weight AMRAP, right? And likewise, if you're 200 pounds, but there's no way you could do 200 pounds, you could do half your body weight. So you could do 100 pounds on the squat bar and do as many reps as you can with half your body weight. Some ratio of your body weight for as many reps as you can. That's another way to do a strength test. So there's a lot of ways to go about this, but the main idea is to actually push yourself and test your strength, at least to some capacity. 1 rep maxes, again, I don't recommend unless you're an experienced lifter. AMRAP tests, like I just mentioned, that is something I would recommend more frequently to new and experienced lifters. Rep tests that aren't 1 rep maxes, so like I said, 5 rep maxes or 10 rep maxes, whatever weight you could do for those, that is something I would also recommend for the less experienced people.